Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are, wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, Digital Media Relations Manager here in Chesterfield. Very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Now, we are working our way through the 5 magisterial districts here with the various members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm very glad to welcome Mr. Kevin Carroll from the Matoaca District to the podcast. Mr. Carroll, welcome to the podcast, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Very glad to have you. Obviously, this is not your first time on the podcast, and I always like to start with a little bit of an intro, but when you have somebody who's been on several times, where do you start? I'm just curious, let's think about the last year or so as part of the Board of Supervisors. How would you sort of describe these last 12 months and your experiences on the board?
Well, time flies when you're having fun.
Amen to that.
I will tell you that, last year was a little bit challenging with the, medical conditions that I had going on, and we're feeling a lot better now. It's been nice. The community's been very nice. We've had a lot of events to attend,
Right.
A lot of great things happening, which I'm sure we'll talk about some of that in the podcast here. And the people in the community have been fantastic.
Yeah.
People have constantly asked me how I'm doing and checking on my health. And I said, well, I woke up. It's a good day.
Yeah, I would imagine that given the last year that you've had and that kind of this sense of going through the budget process and that sense of normalcy was probably a lot of fun, or I guess as fun as budgets can be. Since we're obviously on this other side of that budget process, I do want to give you a chance to sort of share a little bit about your point of view on this budget cycle and what do you think stands out about the budget that the county just put together.
Well, we obviously saw a little bit lowered increase in assessments this year,
right,
as far as market value. We were able to still cut the tax rate by a penny and maintain the 25-cent cut we did in personal property last year. Still our priority is public safety. We're still trying to make sure we fund our fire, police, and sheriff.
Right.
Make sure we can maintain our staffing levels and provide good service to the community.
Right.
And we had to work with schools very closely. We have, it's an up and down when you think about what the state's doing and what type of funding we're going to get from the state.
Right. Right.
And then, quite frankly, we know the school budget's going to increase again. We got a new middle school that's coming out of the ground. We have a groundbreaking coming up. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then another elementary school in my district and then the high school. Yeah.
Lots to do. Obviously, one of the things, too, that is now sort of on the other side is the official announcement about Southside Speedway. You haven't been with us since that became, official, so to speak. I'm just curious to get your point of view on the work that's been done there, the plan that's moving forward, and how excited you are to have those plans be officially, out in the public now.
Well, look, I said the night we purchased the property when we were taking the vote that the only reason I agreed to buy it is so that we could give an opportunity for racing to come back to Chesterfield County. And I meant it when I said it that night. Truth of the matter is, if I had thought that there was a viable purchaser who could have bought the property then and did it without the county being involved, I might have voted differently. That didn't exist. Right. Regardless of what anybody says, it didn't exist.
Right.
And then look how long it took us to actually work a contractual deal out with that. And, we want to make sure that they're successful. I think the deal that was negotiated should give them an opportunity to be able to, redevelop some of the property across the street, have ample parking to provide the races, get the track fixed back up, and get racing back in Chesterfield County, and provide a great addition to our sports tourism that we have. So when people come to town, for some event at River City Sports Complex, or if they're coming across the other side of 288 to the water park, then they can go to a race too.
Yeah. And certainly lots in that area that seem to be, coming soon, so to speak, right? Lots of plans and things. And certainly that'll be a great asset for not just that part of the county, but the county as a whole. Speaking of processes, right? We talk budget process, the process for Southside Speedway, the zoning ordinance modification process, or as we like to call it, ZOMOD. I thought before we moved into the sort of district specific stuff, I might ask you a quick question about that. While that is working its way through that process, lots of public meetings and office hours and things for folks to sort of learn more, offer some input, that kind of stuff. I was just curious to get your thoughts on ZOMOD and that entire process of modernizing the zoning ordinance.
Well, some people think that ZOMOD's being updated for nefarious reasons, and it's not. One of the things that's challenging for me on the board is every single zoning case that comes before the Board of Supervisors is a conditional use. And the reason they have to file a conditional use is because every single zoning case is asking for exemptions outside of our ordinance because the ordinance needs to be updated with more options available than what it currently has. But what I don't want to do is, for example, if someone went through a zoning process in the past and they had a zoning case that they paid for and went through the public process where they had community meetings and then came before the Planning Commission and there was a community meeting and came for the board, what I don't think should happen is that we should arbitrarily change that zoning case. You paid for a zoning, you have a right to the zoning that you got. And even if it was a conditional use or if it was a straight up zoning case. And so, some people think that ZOMOD's going to come in and change all that, and it's not. Those cases are going to remain the way they were. And if they want to change them, they're going to have to bring a case forward to change it. And what I would say is there have been some cases in the past that the county passed where they did an overlay for commercial. And that's something I think we could address with ZOMOD because some people didn't even ask for it. Their land got rezoned, and I don't think that was fair either, quite frankly. And then part of what I would like to see in the future is the exception to the rule should be a conditional use permit. You should be coming to us and saying, well, I have to add for all these things. Right, yeah. It should be the exception to the rule. But I want to, there still needs to be a grandfathering, so to speak, of all the old zoning cases, and then an option of different options. And then, of course, once ZOMOD is completed, and if we get to where we want to have it and it gets a positive vote, then we have to go back and look at the comprehensive plan. Right. Now, some people believe that we should have done the comprehensive plan first.
Flip-flop, right, yeah.
And say, oh, no, you have to do that first. Well, I'm sorry I beg to differ with them, but if you don't know what your options are, how can you designate what a piece of land could be used for? Right. And some people believe, well, you should do that first and then create your options based on what the designations are. I think that you can do the designations first of what you could have, and then then you can turn around and go to the comprehensive plan and take a look at different sections of the county that are potential for future growth in the future, and say, okay, right now, for example, this one piece of property is slated on the south side of Hull Street for suburban residential 2, which is like 2 units per acre. Right. But the truth of the matter is that probably needs to be a commercial zone. So then you can look. Right now, mixed-use communities for commercial and residential are not actually allowed by our zoning ordinance, which is why someone has to bring forward a CUPD. Right. So by changing some of these options, then you can go in and say, okay, well, this is now allowable in certain areas as you dictate throughout the comprehensive plan. Someone may want to bring a case forward that's, once it's all changed and say, well, I really still want to do this. Well, no. I'm not going to do that. We went through this entire process to lay out what could be allowed, and then we redesignated the parcels in the public community meetings, and then the Planning Commission, then Board of Supervisors to say this is what it's going to look like. Right. So the exception to the rule should be someone coming with a CUPD in the future. Yeah.
Let's dig into some district-specific stuff. I always like to start with transportation. I feel like given your experience, not just on the board, but obviously with the CVTA, transportation is like right there in your wheelhouse. On that front, there are always things that folks are curious to hear about, and I know in Matoaca there are a number of these as well. So I know you were just meeting about that next phase of the Powhite Parkway extension, right? What are some of the updates that you've got for us on that front?
Well, I mean, I think probably people, if they've been paying attention, know that we issued some bonds utilizing CVTA dollars last year. We're the first entity as part of the CVTA to do that. I think we issued about $311 million, and those funds are going to be used to really fund multiple transportation projects. But the big one is the first extension of Powhite from Charter Colony to Woolridge Road, and that's a section that we already own. We didn't have to go through the federal NEPA study for that. And so we hope to get that through design build and get it to, contract sooner than later. And also in that same section of the county, we'll be continuing the extension of Woolridge Road all the way up to 288. Right now, you can't go all the way up to 288. And once that's tied in, that'll be a good traffic reliever for folks that are traveling through there in the morning to get to work and get home in the afternoon, or just go out to dinner. Yeah. And then, we have a 360 widening project to widen Hull Street from Wood Lake all the way out to Otterdale Road. There's money in the CVTA, about $32 million that's set aside for that project. I spoke before the Commonwealth Transportation Board public hearing the other day, asking for the additional funding we need to make that project come out of the ground. The CVTA a couple of years ago actually awarded $750,000 for preliminary engineering, so we've gone through that process already. Cool. And that's an important project that will help move traffic through that area and provide a safe crosswalk from Hampton Park across the Fox Club Parkway, a signalized crosswalk for kids that are going to school in the morning. So.
And then we've got I believe VDOT awarded the contract for Bailey Bridge Connector. Isn't that right?
Finally. So that hopefully will get out of the ground, and that'll be a 4-lane highway that will connect from Brad McNair Parkway down to Bailey Bridge. You know, right now, if you live in Cameron Bay, for example, or if you live in Bay Hill Point and you want to go to Kroger or to Cold Stone to get an ice cream, well, you either have to go down Bailey Bridge all the way around to Hull Street, or go up to Deer Run Drive and cut through Deer Run Drive, which puts a significant amount of traffic on Deer Run Drive to get up to the Kroger. With this, people who live down there will not only just be able to get up to Kroger, and I don't get commission from Kroger.
No free ads.
I'm using it as a reference point.
But I mean, that's why arterials and the network is supposed to work, right?
Right, but they can also get to 288 in the morning,
right,
or at night.
Yep.
Right. So, we know there's a big bottleneck on 288 South every evening. People coming from Henrico and Goochland, coming home, getting off on Hull Street. Well, a lot of those people are making left-hand turns to get home. Some are pulling into, pretty much every left going west.
Yeah.
And so this will take a lot of the traffic will be able to bypass Hull Street and continue on the Commonwealth Center Parkway and go up and then make the left and then go a southern route.
Right.
Which will take some of the afternoon traffic off of Hull Street.
Right. Now, it's not quite transportation, but I know there's the conservation easement around the schools, preserving that green space. I wasn't really sure where to put this on my list of questions for you, so I'm just going to ask you a little bit about sort of that conservation piece of things and why that is so important.
Well, when we had to figure out where to put the high school, when I got elected in 2019, there were no plans for new schools. No high school, no middle school, no elementary school, nothing. We didn't own the land. So we bought land, a big purchase, and we paid $13 million for the Upper Mag piece. That's pennies on the dollar, but compared to what we're going to do with it, just for one school site, somewhere else in the county, you'd pay $10 million.
Yeah.
Right. So we paid $13 million for that, and so part of what you have to look at, though, is the secondary roads and whether or not when you put a high school, middle school, and elementary school, even though they're a couple of months out of the year, there's still traffic, and even though it's 2 times a day, what is it going to do to secondary roads from a traffic standpoint?
Yeah.
Well, VDOT utilizes a formula for 10 trips per day per house.
Okay.
So if you had 911 houses, it's 19,000 trips per day.
Right.
That would have been added to the infrastructure there. By taking the 911 houses away, then you take those trips away, and then you really just calculate what your usage is for the high school, middle school, elementary school, which is about a third. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is, we have to have some green space in the county, quite frankly, and this was a really great, appropriate use for all of this land. It's going to add about another 350 acres of green space around there. That'll be a conservation easement that will not get built on, and so that the people that live out there will be able to utilize the woods, walking trails, and it'll be a great environment around the schools. Mm-hmm. And it's also a good buffer as a protection area between, the Upper Mag development and Swift Creek and the reservoir.
Now, I've got a whole section here on capital updates, and capital is not really necessarily the right word for it, but it made sense in my mind. But I feel like we have so many different things to talk about here because we got ribbon cuttings, we got groundbreakings, we got all kinds of fun stuff. So talk to me a little bit about sort of the high school, the middle school, all the fun stuff going on in Matoaca.
Yeah, so I guess about a month or 2 back, we had the groundbreaking for the new elementary school, which is right now at the end of Westerly Parkway. And since then, we've also awarded the contract for about $43 million for all the road improvements using the design-build model. So because we had a time frame, we had to actually get these roads built before you could open the elementary school. So the elementary school is slated to open up in in 2026, probably August of 26. So we've got these contracts out there to fix and create the North-South Connector Road, which is what it's named right now. But we actually have a plan coming forward to name the roads around the schools after our public safety employees who have passed away. And so that's a project that's being looked at right now what would be the appropriate names, and we'll come out with that later. But the North-South Connector Road, the roundabouts at Westerly and Otterdale, the roundabouts at Otterdale and Duval, and then the roundabout at Duval in the North-South Connector Road. So all of that needs to be done by 2026 in order to open up the elementary school. And then we have a ribbon cutting coming up in July for the middle school, which I was up there the other day. It looks spectacular.
Sweet.
Not to quote Trump, but it looks spectacular. And then the new high school will have a groundbreaking, I think, is coming up in June.
June, right? Yeah.
And they've already started land clearing for the roads and other things up there. So we're moving along with an accelerated project that we had to do because we have all these houses coming out of the ground in Mag Green, and they're going to continue to come out of the ground. Harper's Mill. So there's a lot of growth in that area that we had to have school capacity for.
And speaking of other things, you've got I know, still looking for the appropriate location for the police station on Western Hall. And I think the 2 libraries, though, got pushed out because of some of the economic pieces of this, right?
So the libraries, they were part of the 2022 bond referendum. They're just been pushed out a little bit so we can push some of the debt issuance out a little bit, be more conservative. So really the libraries will get built probably after the high school. Okay. But there will be a brand new library in the complex where the middle school and the elementary school and the high school are, and then the Ettrick-Matoaca Library will get. And we're also working, and that project's being funded. It actually is funded, but it's going to be in stages. A sidewalk that'll go from downtown Ettrick at Hickory Road all the way along River Road.
That's great.
To the library.
That's great.
And hopefully by time the new library is constructed, the new sidewalk will be coinciding with that, and so it will have the transportation piece coinciding with the capital piece.
Yeah. Last thing here, I know there's a real desire to bring a hospital to Western Hull Street. And I believe in May, I want to say it's like the 2nd or 3rd week, May 19th maybe, for that Chesterfield Pavilion at VCU. Just curious to get some of your thoughts on that whole process.
So the pavilion for VCU is actually right here,
right
next to headquarters off of Iron Bridge Road. That's going to be really exciting. If you look at the county, if you look at Midlothian, you have St. Francis in the west, Johnston Willis kind of in the middle, and then Chippenham on the eastern side of the Midlothian district. And then when you get south of that, there's no hospitals, right? But if you look at population growth, well, certainly west of 288 on Hull Street, when we looked at the census data in 2020 alone, it showed that over 14,000 people had moved into that section of the county. Since then, we know it's a heck of a lot more. And so the new piece down here, and then there'll be additional medical facilities beyond that, will be excellent for the central part of Chesterfield County. And then we're working with a developer with a project they're going to move forward at Otterdale and 360 that would hopefully have a medical campus and provide a bunch of restaurants, a town center style restaurant section where you would have new restaurants and a beer garden. Okay. They were talking with several different grocery chains, like Kroger and Trader Joe's, as an example. Again, don't get commission for that either.
No free ads.
But that's so there's a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick before I got one more question for you, but I do have a quick follow up, which is, when you start working through that fairly long list of different things coming to the community, I'm just curious from your standpoint as a supervisor how. I know it's a lot of work, and I'm certainly not trying to make it sound that it's not, but it has to be sort of fun, right? To be able to be a part of helping all of these, these different pieces come together for the community. Like you mentioned, when you came on in 2019, there weren't plans for schools. I'm just curious to get, what is it like to be a part of that and to be able to bring some of that stuff to fruition?
Actually, sometimes I have to pinch myself because I don't believe I get to do it. I mean, if you had told me years ago when I moved here in '86 to be a police officer that one day I'd be one of 5 people elected to run the county, I probably would have laughed in your face and said, I'm not sure what kind of drugs you're doing, but you need to share them. It is amazing when you look at the things we've been able to accomplish, bringing companies here like Lego and Plenty, even though they're struggling, they're still providing great service to here in Chesterfield County to the strawberries they're creating. But there's so many other companies that we brought here that help us with offset that commercial tax base that we need to offset the residential piece. And then, the expansions that we've had of our parks, some of the playgrounds, some of the expansions in not just River City Sports Complex, but even what we have coming in Horner Park.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, we brought a lot of modernization to not just to those type of facilities, so public safety, and then when I ran, a lot of people said we want restaurants, we want economic growth, we want more things in Western Hull Street, and so we've seen several businesses open up that are Latitude Seafood. Again, don't get commission, but it's great food. They've opened up, and then if you look at Cosby Village, there's a new Chipotle. There's a new, there's a new Firebirds coming there too. People probably don't know about that one. There's a Firebirds coming. There's a Panera Bread there. There's a Starbucks there. And so when you can put those type of commercial opportunities further west on Hull Street, then people who live in Mad Green and all those other neighborhoods, they don't have to drive to Commonwealth Center Parkway to get a cup of coffee or to get a bagel. Or to get a good Chipotle. So and there's more coming further west. And so I mean, part of what you're supposed to do, I thought anyway, when I got elected, is actually plan for the future.
Right.
And we've had to do a lot of catch up.
Yeah.
From things that other people planned for the future, but then didn't actually get a chance to follow up with all the infrastructure.
Right.
And now we're following up with the infrastructure, and there's going to be a lot of great things coming out of the ground in the future. It's going to make people's lives a lot better. People live in Westerly and Sun Lake, just those two neighborhoods as an example. Their kids are going to be able to walk to elementary school, walk to middle school, and even walk to high school or ride a bike. And they have a public library there. Yeah. And all those roads have been updated. They'll all be brand new. Yeah. People from Mad Green will be right close. Right. So we're building neighborhood schools and providing that old style, so to speak, of school experience. We have great schools in Chesterfield County, but some of them, Grange Hall, for example, is a great school. Way out on Hull Street. Yeah. There's no neighborhoods there. Right. So everybody who's coming to that school is getting bused from pretty far away. Right. So we're going to actually save transportation costs in one respect because they're going to be a lot closer to the neighborhoods. And then we're going to have to rebuild Grange Hall somewhere, and we're working on that project as well.
That's a problem for a future Kevin Carroll. You know what I mean?
No, this Kevin Carroll's taking care of it now.
That's a very good point.
It's part of the bond referendum.
Touche.
And so we've got to find a location for it and get the plan in place. I'm not kicking the can down the road.
No, I understand.
For anybody else to have to worry about. Yeah. We need to take care of these things and put them in place, and so that there's a plan. Yeah.
All right, let's get you out of here on this one. As I did with your colleagues who've already appeared on the show in 2025, what are some of the challenges that you see?
Has it already been 30 minutes, really?
We're getting close. Wow. What are some of the challenges you see facing the county as a whole and your district specifically over the course of the next year?
Well, I mean, right now, Matoaca's so big. Yeah. So issues that happen in Ettrick are different than issues that happen in the western part of Hull Street. Right. So, Ettrick is more about people wanting more economic development. They want more restaurants. They want different things down there that they're already getting in Western Hull Street. And so when they look at Western Hull Street, they say, well, how come they're getting all that? Well, because economic development, restaurants, they chase the rooftops. And where the rooftops are, that's where the people are, and that's where that economic development's going. But, we have transportation projects that we've got to get funded that are outside of all the ones we already have funded. For example, Hull Street from 288 west to Woodlake, we have several exchange projects. One is an exchange project at Woodlake where we're going to take and change from 2 lanes out to 3 lanes out, and that'll help move traffic out of Woodlake in the morning and move it back in the afternoons a lot quicker, which will allow for quicker run times out and then quicker run times east and west, right? Commonwealth Center Parkway, we've got intersection improvements coming there. And so we have intersection improvements programmed out all of those intersections for the west. And so we're going to continue putting in to get money to fund those as we move forward. But the plans are in place. The design stuff is in place. And so it's just, and then we're competing with the rest of the county, right? Because to sit there and say that Midlothian doesn't have issues or Clover Hill doesn't have issues or all the other districts, Dale, Bermuda. And so it's also balancing how you fund all this, right? And without, breaking the back of the taxpayers. Right. And so, our goal is to make steady progress and get the Parkway built, which is the biggest lift. Yeah. That's going to happen in the western part of Hull Street in the future is finding the funding for that. I don't want to put a toll on the road. If you don't know, I'll say this so people will know. January 1 of 2027, the 75-cent toll on Courthouse Road comes off on the Poet Parkway extension. So that's a good thing. But the challenge is going to be, how do we find the funding to fund it all the way to Hull Street?
Right.
And then the last thing that's not on the list that we talked about is, we have a proposal moving forward through the Planning Commission coming to the board to remove the east-west freeway from the comprehensive plan. Right now, the Poway Parkway extension is slated coming to Hull Street. If it was to go south of it, would go right through the Richmond Metro Zoo. It would destroy the zoo.
Right.
Well, I'm not doing that.
No.
And then it would go all the way south through the county to 95. Mm-hmm. And what we've looked at overall is the cost of that road, number one, is outrageous. It's 35 miles. We don't own 1 inch of it. When we look at the trip generation based on how many people live along those roads, it really doesn't justify the build of the road. We could actually take the funding, a lot less funding than what it would cost us to build that, and actually improve the roads through southern Matoaca, like River Road, like Beach Road. There are other road improvements that make more sense to move traffic through there. If we widen River Road, or if we widen Beach Road, than it does to put a road through and still then have the same problems with the secondary roads that are windy, that have ditches. We can improve those other roads and provide for a better traveling experience over time, and we're moving in that direction.
Good deal. Well, Mr. Carroll, thank you very much for the time. Appreciate you coming back on the podcast. Always love having you on.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. As I said, I don't believe I get to do this. It's awesome.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA. On Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia, all one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast pages. Search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that your shows are sold. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating or review, we greatly appreciate it. As always, a video version of our show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, Chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit some feedback anytime, make a suggestion, or just reach out to us. You can watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7. On the weekends at noon, that is Comcast Channel 98, Verizon Channel 28. Lastly, check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent Media Services for all they do. And my thanks to you for joining us today. So from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care. From blogs to podcasts.
And I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again.
Weekly video segments and newsletters.
Social media, the latest community news.
And this is your Chesterfield News Minute for September 19th.
How to get in touch, and everything in between. If you want to know about Chesterfield County, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us. Connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.